Hi, I'm Andrew from Parlogram, and in this video I'm talking to the director of a new Beatles film called Evolver 62, written and presented by Beatles historian and author Mark Lewisohn. The show originally took place at the Bloomsbury Theatre in London in October 2022, where Mark took the audience through 62 moments from the pivotal year of 1962. The film comprises sections of the theatre show, along with newly filmed sequences of Mark on location in Liverpool, London, and at his office in Kent. It's released on February the 10th, 2026 as a feature-length film, streaming on Prime in the US and UK, and I'm pleased to say is also available on DVD. Last week, I sat down with the film's director Chris Purcell to talk about how Evolver 62 was made, and what it was like to work with Mark, and what viewers can expect from the finished film. But I started by asking Chris to tell me a little bit about his background, both as a fan and a filmmaker.
Well, like I imagine a lot of the people watching, I'm a lifelong Beatle fan, and I also have a Liverpool connection. All my family came from there. So I was there a lot as a kid, and I just got a very early fascination in them, and the fact that they were so connected with that city. There's just something thrilling about that they're, globally famous, and there's this funny parochial place that we used to go to with chip shops and terraced streets, and that's where these people come from. It's crazy. And I think I also developed a very early interest in filmmaking, so I've been lucky enough to make that into my profession. And on a number of occasions, I've been able to combine the two. And, when that happens, it's kind of heaven.
When you think about it, these Belisha beacons have been blinking day and night, year in, year out, since the Beatles were here. On and off, millions and millions of times, like the pulsing heartbeat of half a lifetime.
So I've actually made, quite a few Beatle-related things, probably maybe 8, including the mouse piece that I made last year, about the mouse's point of view underneath the cabin stage. When I left film school, I'd always wanted to make documentaries, and I'd been sending in endless proposals to broadcasters for years and getting absolutely nowhere. And then in '95, of course, the anthology hit, and it occurred to me that I could actually do a Beatle-related proposal. And I sent that in to Channel 4, expecting the same response I'd had for all the other times. And much to my amazement and absolute delight, they commissioned it, and it's going to be on TV.
John, stop. Pay attention. Right. From there.
The other highlight probably is the Abbey Road zebra crossing piece I did, which also made it onto Channel 4. So that gave my career a bit of a boost. And I think I have the feeling that if you do anything sort of half decent that's Beatle related, because of this underlying affection that there is for the band, it's probably going to get noticed. So I owe them a lot, really. As do you.
Me too. Same here.
A few years ago, Mark came up with this idea of doing a show, a one-man show on Abbey Road, and just how it all came about, and all the fantastic kind of detail behind the story of that, because it is amazing. And then I think because that was such a success, he decided to do something on 1962 and came up with this very neat idea of telling the story through 62 objects, documents, or artifacts that he can use to relate that story. And they're all part of his research material that he's basically giving us a glimpse of. A fascinating way of doing it. And he asked me whether I could help him record it. And I was thinking, well, I can, but that's quite a daunting task. I was explaining to him, if you're filming Michael McIntyre at the London Apollo or something, it would be a full-on OB production with 6 cameras feeding into a outside broadcast truck, and it cost tens of thousands, and there was no budget. We were going to get the funding later. And also, I'm not used to working that way. I'm a documentary maker. If I have 3 people on the crew, that's a luxury. But then we started thinking it through, and I collaborated with this other filmmaker your viewers might know, Simon Weitzman, who made Miss O'Dell and A Love Letter to the Beatles. And we kind of assembled this ragtag crew of friends and, associates, and it gave them all a camera. But luckily, Mark was doing 3 shows, and he's got this amazing memory. He does it all from cue cards. And his performance, despite the fact it's across 3 shows, is really consistent. So I thought this could work, if we just edit these together. And, we persuaded him to wear the same outfit throughout the 3. So then we knew we were in business, really. So that was the stage element. But we realised what would take it up a notch would be to actually insert some location sequences, because that's going to make it immediately more cinematic. And the amazing thing about that was that those locations in Liverpool in particular, there's quite a few that are very, very similar to the way they were back in the Beatles' day. So we were able to get Mark to bring these streets and halls to life, and reveal their Beatley secrets with all the delicious detail that he can use. It was great, particularly as someone who knows Liverpool quite well, because I know these places, but I never knew them the way that Mark was able to give me the kind of inside track on. It's fantastic, really, a real privilege to walk the streets with him. That bit as well came about from an idea I had for a short film, which is how I originally met Mark, because I wanted to make a little film about him and his process. So that fascinates me. It's not just, I think with me, it's not just the Beatles that fascinate me and their music. It's also their phenomenon, the sheer kind of phenomenon of them and the effect they had on all of us. And Mark is like emblematic of that, because he's devoted his life, so much of his life, to accurately telling their story. And I think that's the other thing as well about the way he works, because he used primary source material. So he's got stacks of this stuff that we filmed in his office. And just him telling the story that way was something that we were really pleased to capture on film, because I don't think there's anything quite like this in the Beatle world.
But when I was researching my book, Tune In, I thought, I wonder if anybody else before the Beatles had ever played a Tamla Motown song, or whether a Tamla record had ever been played on British radio. So I spent a day peering into microfilm, excruciating work, really hard on the eyes, going back from March 62, going back through the daily programme logs at the BBC archive out in Berkshire, hoping that I wouldn't find it. And indeed, I didn't find any prior example. So maybe I missed one, but I think it's more likely that the very first exposure of a Tamla song on British radio was by the Beatles, who wouldn't have known that at the time, but it's a lovely thing to discover now.
So in the late spring, early summer of 1962, George Harrison, though only 19, had a car. And one day he came to this place, Allerton Golf Course, with Paul McCartney and Paul's brother Mike and John Lennon. And he parked his car, give or take a yard or two, about here.
Yeah, in the film we see the sound recordist next to Mark quite a lot. Why is that?
Well, I was really thinking that Mark's got this really kind of conversational style, and, on stage, he's kind of freestyling the whole thing from cue cards. And I wanted to continue that on location, so I really didn't want him to be talking straight to camera. I wanted him to relate the story to someone else, and the natural thing was to use someone in the crew. Channeling one of my favourite documentarians, Nick Broomfield, who's always in the shots in his film, holding the microphone. Some of your viewers might know him. We thought we'd use the same visual grammar and have Paul, the sound recordist / co-producer, holding the mic. So Mark could have someone he could actually relate these stories to. and have someone reacting to them.
Yeah, did you get recognised in Liverpool?
Of course, Mark got recognised a number of times. So, I mean, there's no one like him, is there? There's no one doing that level of scholarly work on this band. And, you know, thank God he is, because we all need to know this stuff the way it actually happened, not, you know, have some spin put on it.
Did people sort of stop him and tell him their stories?
Yeah. Obviously, Beatle tourists on the Beatle trail, and then suddenly you see Mark Lewisohn, you know, so... Next best thing.
Yeah.
He'd never been to Liverpool Airport, you know, airside. It's not really airside anymore. It's now a hotel, but it still took some wangling to get round there amongst the aircraft. And that was great to see, because that is totally unchanged. You know, it's not Liverpool Airport anymore. But they basically preserved it and then parked some vintage aircraft where they would have been. So that was obviously a fantastic location to tell that particular part of the story. And I think he hadn't seen that close up, so that was... You could see he was quite excited. And that was the first place we went to. So we were kind of following a logistically sensible trail through Merseyside, and that it made sense to start right at the bottom, which is where the airport is. Yeah, well, I've got a few actually, but the absolute favourite takes place at Hume Hall. So it's on the other side of the Mersey, the River Mersey from Liverpool, in this place called Port Sunlight. It's still kind of very original, and at least two very important things happened there in Beatle lore. One was that it was the location where Ringo was officially in the Beatles, his first appearance as an official Beatle, which is in August 1962. And then much later in the year, in October, the Beatles were back there, and a remarkable thing happened, because they were recorded for the very, very first time on tape for an interview for hospital radio. And obviously they'd be interviewed hundreds of times, maybe thousands after that throughout their career, but this was the very first one. And there happens to be a photo of them being interviewed. And we found the exact spot in this back room in this hall, which presumably was a dressing room at some stage. There was a very kind of distinctive bit of architrave around the doorway, and we could see that that's exactly where they were. So that was a very satisfying moment. And then, though, Mark produces this spool of tape, which was the actual spool of tape that that this interview was captured on in 1962, the actual tape, because he bought it from the bloke who recorded it back then. And we put this on a reel-to-reel, the 60s kind of Ewer reel-to-reel, so it all felt authentic.
Well, it's a very great pleasure for us this evening to say hello to an up-and-coming Merseyside group, the Beatles.
And played it back. And it was just kind of spooky. So you're hearing the voices of this actual recording on, you know, in the place where it was done, but decades later. And they're kind of young, eager, the way that we would become familiar with them, but sort of a more diffident version maybe. But the amazing thing about the date, which you might recognise, 27th of October, 1962. So that was the absolute climax of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Kennedy and Khrushchev were really squaring up, when we were literally teetering on the edge of nuclear Armageddon. And the Beatles were booked to play at Hume Hall that day. And there's just no hint of that in the recording. And it made me wonder, you know, that they're all war babies. Maybe they were just using that maxim, you know, keep calm and carry on. I think the whole film is full of these kind of delicious kind of moments. And if you're into detail and the minutiae of that era, then you're going to love this, I think.
And sort of everybody's going to learn something new.
Yeah, I mean, because Mark is so steeped in it. You know, he's been immersed in this world for decades, and it just pours out of him. So you just get these really unexpected, incredible textures and details that just take you right back to that time.
At the moment, the Beatles are making 4 films to be released in 2028. What's your thoughts about them?
It just so happens, Andrew, I have a connection to the film. I know I'm not being employed as a consultant, unfortunately. But you see this machine, I managed to pay for that because I sold a Brennell tape recorder that I've owned for about 20 years, which broke down unrepairably, I would say, about 3 years ago, much to my horror. And I thought, well, I've just got to sell this, I'll just put it on eBay, spares or repairs, But I bigged up the fact that it was a Beatle model, because it was the same machine that John Lennon had about 4 of in his attic studio. So I put that in a quite flowery description on eBay. Anyway, blow me down. Within a day, it sold. And the lady who came round to pick it up said she worked in film. I said, oh, that's interesting. I'm in film. What is it you do? And she said, oh, I'm an art director. I said, oh, great. Is it for a documentary or something? No, it's for the new Sam Mendes films. So I may well be seeing my old machine in the background of John Lennon's attic studio. Unemployment, I think.
And all at the press of a button.
I was a child in that post-war era, and I can remember the sense of optimism that was dawning. We used to be showing them as school children, here's the city of the future. There's all these sleek people in carp coats living the 60s dream.
For the past few years, I've had this idea about making something about the technology and the infrastructure that enabled the Beatles to happen. Because it occurred to me that, without that, if the Beatles had, risen to prominence 5 years earlier, there wouldn't have been the kind of infrastructure to enable them to be globally famous, because it was all so new.
Now that the supercar has been dolled up in the grand manner, not even a Beatle could wish for more.
Jet travel was new, electronic miniaturization in the form of transistors was new, recording, the techniques they used was new, satellite television was brand new. Literally 5 years earlier, a lot of that stuff isn't there. It's like a confluence of these things all occurring at the same time, and I think there's a film there, and I've been working on it behind the scenes, so fingers crossed that something will happen.
Yeah, cool. That's a cool idea. My thanks to Chris for his time, and if, like me, you weren't able to attend the theatre show, this is definitely something you want to watch, and one I'll be adding to my DVD collection. So if you're in the UK or in the US, you can watch Evolver 62 now via streaming on Prime, and it's also available on DVD from Maverick Entertainment. And a link to that is in the description. And if you'd like to check out Chris's other Beatles-related work, head on over to liverpoolwestproductions.com. And if you enjoyed this interview and want more Beatles history content, why not give us a like and a sub and join us next week for more fascinating stories from Beatles history. But that's all for this one, so I'll say bye for now, and thanks for watching.